So if we've learned anything at all about flywheel blasters, it's that it's very easy with a little bit of simple electrical engineering to turn them into something much more powerful than their stock form. I thought about fun paint jobs I could do to this Zeus, but I'm already Team Red, so I really like the red aesthetic. I honestly think that the shell is very comfortable as it is, and I really don't think that I need to do much. It already came in Drac colors, so it should be ready to go. So what I'm going to do in this video is show you how to modify it to A, take a more efficient style battery, B, remove any of the electronic locks, and then streamline the soldering with better wiring, and then C, I guess anything else that's necessary to make this a much more interesting blaster. So let's go ahead, crack it open, and see what we're working with. So the first thing that I did was I unscrewed the battery tray, slid that out, and took all these heavy C batteries out of it. Then I undid all of the Phillips head screws. I'm not going to bother removing them completely from the shell, as I do not intend to paint this blaster. So upon butterflying this Zeus open, we see a few things that are all quite interesting. One, it looks like the switch is not a cherry switch, so we will be replacing that with a much better switch here. So it's running on a lever system, clicking down through there. We're just going to make it a direct cherry switch, which should be very, very nice. Nothing really to fix about this super awkward clip release, but that is what it is. And then we can see that the gauge of wire that they're using is actually might even be a little bit thicker than the typical N-Strike stuff, but it's certainly not as thick as the 18 gauge silicon wire, which we will be replacing it with. So we're going to rewire that. We'll take out these. They're either resistors or thermistors. I can't tell since they're covered in shrink wrap. So we'll get to that. Then the trigger action is very crisp. We might make this a full auto Zeus. That would be really interesting. I kind of like the semi-auto functionality of it, but I assume I could teach myself to work it so that a full auto Zeus would be semi-automatic. You can also see that these motors are not the traditional 130 size motors, which means that we will not be doing a motor replacement. That said, they seem to be quite hardy, so I think that they will handle the LiPo pack that I throw in here very nicely, and then we'll rewire this. Probably seat the LiPo pack in here, and then put a foam insert in, carve this off completely, and then use this just as a back end cap. That should leave the weight kind of where we want the weight without putting it too terribly far in the back, as well as just reduce the amount of wiring that we have to use. So that's our first look at the Zeus's internals. Now let's actually start doing some of these wonderful things that I've been talking about. So as we peel away the layers of mystery, some things become more clear. First off, this Rev Trigger Switch here, I intend to use the original pin in this high amperage rated switch here to just pin it into place. That way we don't have to fool with as much epoxy putty, and then we'll just melt this out and seat this wherever that lies. So it's going to look something like, here we go, something like this in that area, and that'll leave us plenty of space for our leads to pull out and up. We will be carving this off in its entirety, as I don't like these switches very much. Then I wanted to make it clear that there is one lock in here that we will certainly be removing, and that is this lock. I cannot pull the trigger right now. This is the clip or magazine lock here. Pushing that in allows you to see a good look here at how this functions. So this flap opens to let a ball through, this flap closes to stop a second ball from coming through, and then the trigger pushes the ball through into the flywheel. So there's that mechanism. Hopefully you can see that from multiple angles there, and it'll help you in your reassembly however you choose to go about doing so. I'm going to try and make this into a full auto Zeus, and I'll explain that after I get it kind of where I want it to be and working in the way that I would like it to work. As far as this goes, I'm going to be removing all of this garbage. I've started with these orange parts here. A lot of the pieces in the Zeus have been glued in. You can see that this was glued in and this is glued down, so I'm going to break that glue as I remove this portion of the circuit. So upon removing these 4 screws, I lifted the entire Zeus flywheel cage housing out. These flywheels are vastly superior to Nerf N-Strike flywheels for a variety of reasons, but more importantly than that, it lets me get at a few things here. So first, we can get at this electronic lock up here, which is, I want to say, the magazine electronic lock, and should be accessible once we remove this panel. Bingo! And so there's that. We can also remove the mechanical lock. So here's the mechanical magazine lock. We will remove that. We will completely remove this from the circuit, and then I'm not entirely sure what this is supposed to be. Maybe it was part of... You know what? I honestly don't even care. I'm removing this as well. I will act under the assumption that it is a lock until proven otherwise. And so that is about as streamlined as our mechanism gets. You can see that this pin locates up into here and is what pulls our flapper forward, and then this back here locks into this and moves it down. So that is a complete understanding of this. I'm going to go ahead and desolder here and here, as I believe these to be the end bell leads for these motors, and then I think that'll get us pretty close to where we want to be, and we can start playing with this, trying to get a little bit full auto action going on here. An overall very simple mechanism from Hasbro. I expected something much more complicated out of this system. So you can see here that I got one end bell off cleanly, and then the other end bell has kind of exploded on me a little bit. There's a good reason for that. I have been trying to get through this solder that Hasbro put on at the factory, but you can see that they coated it in glue, which in addition to just giving off some noxious fumes is making it very difficult because it's gunking up my soldering gun here. So trying very hard to get this to flux on me, and there we go. So you can see there's the yuck that it's giving off, which is completely unideal for our purposes. And then now that it's fluid, that'll come right off, and we have clean end bells here. I'm killing my soldering gun. I'm going to come in and remove these from the side here, and we should have once more two very clean end bells. Because of that yuck, I would recommend soldering with a parent for this one, or at least having completed some successful soldering jobs in the past before you attempt this. Now, I could completely remove these motors and replace them, but I think that they're going to be plenty sufficient for our purposes, so I'm going to leave them, lock them back down, and then solder them cleanly in a color-coded fashion so that it's very easy for you guys to understand at home. Then I think that covers the wiring for this, as I will just be doing the cherry switch that I mentioned prior. So I've wired mine with the black leads in front and the red leads in the back, having never moved any of the motors. Hopefully that helps you guys out as well. Here we just have a quick polarity check, red to red, black to black. Currently using a 2S LiPo for this test, so you can see the dart is in the flywheel. Should be plenty of torque to throw this dart out of the flywheels if it goes the correct direction. Our polarity is right. And hard to argue with that. Alright, keep moving forward. Alright, so we are well into the prototyping phase, and at this point, honestly, beyond the point of no return. So, you can see here that this is how I've done this switch. It now articulates and activates, so this should be very nice. Getting that wired up very soon. Over here we have very clean leads to work with, but this is what the focus of this is. Now, we have successfully completed a full auto Zeus prototype, and I'll show you how I did that. So removing this, you can see that I came in, and with a combination of melting and dremeling, I have sawed out the entire little lip here and formed an ellipses so that the balls can go through in a full auto sequence using the pusher from their magazine. Now, I also had to remove some pieces to accomplish this. Piece number one that I removed is the flapper piece, no longer semi-auto unless you have extreme trigger discipline and the ability to let one ball through and then release quickly enough that this extension spring will stop the forward momentum of the balls. I think I'm going to be able to pull off burst fire, but I've been tinkering with it for a little while. Also, you have to completely remove this. This was a flap. It fit in here like so. It just pulls right out, and that is what stops the second ball from coming through, but since it's full auto, we want as many balls to come through as possible. So this is how I've accomplished this, and now I need to tell you something. So in the prototyping phase for this, I had no idea how fast these flywheels would be moving or how heavy they are. So while I've been working with very super light flywheels in strike blasters forever now, I was just doing the same sort of thing. I handle my cage as I'm doing the prototyping. So the prototyping was done outside the shell because it's a pain to put it all in there. So I had this kind of like this, and I was holding this with my right hand. I hooked up a LiPo battery to these leads, and I had it going, and I was holding it like this. And I just want to show you, shouldn't be too squeamish here, that that's what I did to my middle finger on my left hand because of the way I was holding it right here. These flywheels are semi-serrated the way that they're going through. So not actually serrated, but once they're moving fast enough, there's really no difference. And it went pretty far in before I caught it and noticed, and then I cleaned it. And I'm just telling you that, like, in addition to completely voiding your warranty doing this mod on your blaster, it's also like you're working with some high voltages, some very high RPMs on these flywheels, and these flywheels are heavy, so be safe. Either wear gloves or get a parent to help you with this. At this point, I feel reasonably comfortable, but definitely mod at your own risk. There are going to be little scratches and cuts that occur just in this hobby organically, but I wanted to point this one out because these flywheels took me by surprise, and therefore, logically, they can take pretty much anybody by surprise because I've been doing this for a little while. So look out for that. This is the full auto prototype. I'm going to put everything back together now, show you one look at the internals once they've all been installed, and then I will close it and do a final firing demo. So this is one last look before I close it up. You can see the switch down here. I decided to go with a metal pin instead of the wrap because it was much cleaner doing it this way. These are E-tape wraps on our leads, then an E-tape wrap here to make sure that everything stays consistent, and then all the way down here to an XT60 connect. So this should all be very clean. We have plenty of length to pull this all the way out and change our LiPo up in the back, and then it'll slide all the way through, at least in theory, and then we'll probably use foam to hold the batteries into place. But I'm going to close it up and stop talking about it because I'm really ready to see if this works. Alright guys, so here we have the final firing demo for my Zeus mod guide. I've turned this into quite the hellacious primary. It is very nice now. The full auto has taken a little bit of getting used to. I like to fire it in a burst mode, and I find that I can get about 3 to 4 good bursts of ammo downrange in any singular magazine. So it now fires, of course, with this open or closed. I'm going to open it up just so it's open, I guess, and then we'll fire it. I do have a LiPo in here. It's rattling a little bit as I have not thrown foam in there. That kind of stinks, but it's not the end of the world. So I'm going to stop talking about it and just show you how much harder this thing hits and how much faster these guys rev up. So that was a pretty good demonstration. We had two round bursts into another burst into a final kind of like 5-round burst. So I think that this is easily the most effective overhaul you could do for any sort of rival style battle, as it's now doing multiple modes of firing and has the ability to just empty its magazine very quickly. So I think that it's a very efficient primary, and I really like this modification. As always, modify at your own risk, but I think that this one's sweet. Definitely well worth looking into. As always guys, thanks for watching. That's been how to overhaul your Zeus with a different battery source, cleaner wiring, remove all of the locks, and ultimately get it firing full auto, which is pretty sweet.